Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 23 Ziyarat 1948. The All India Muslim League Council met for the last time in Karachi on December 14th to 15th, 1947. Some 300 members, 160 from India, assembled in the capital of Pakistan and voted to do to the Muslim League what that party had been so instrumental in accomplishing throughout British India, splitting it into independent and separate Pakistan and India parties. Jinnah left his sick bed to preside over this final session of his party's council. He addressed them in English, and his speech was later translated into Urdu, Pakistan's national language, by Sardar Abdur Rab Nishtar, the Minister of Communications. As you know, the Muslim League has achieved and established Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam told them. The Muslims were a crowd, they were demoralized, and they had to suffer economically. We have achieved Pakistan not for the League, not for our own colleagues, but for the masses. Not everyone was satisfied, however. Maulana Jamal Mian angrily rose to protest that Pakistan could hardly take pride in calling itself a Muslim state. He found many un-Islamic things in the state from top to bottom. The behavior of the minister is not like that of Muslims. The poor cannot enter the houses of the ministers. The needy and the lowly cannot see them. Only the courtiers can enter. Those who possess large bungalows can enter. The name of Islam has been disgraced enough. We are only a 4-month-old child, Jinnah responded, not much stronger himself. You know, somebody would like to overthrow us. I know you would say we have not done such and such a thing, but we are only 4 months old. In addition to resolving to divide itself and electing Liaquat Ali Khan, convener of the Pakistan Muslim League, the council placed on record its deep sense of sorrow and its feeling of horror at the widespread acts of organized violence and barbarity which have taken place, resulting in the loss of hundreds of thousands of innocent lives, colossal destruction of property, wanton outrages against women, and mass migration of populations whereby millions of human beings have been uprooted from their hearths and homes and reduced to utter destitution. The Council also views with great concern the rising tide of communal antagonism against the Muslim minority in the Indian Union, where in spite of repeated declarations by the Congress that minorities will be dealt with justly and fairly, Muslim life and property continue to be insecure. Liaquat flew to Delhi for a meeting of the Joint Defence Council on December 22nd, at which time Nehru handed him a letter charging that the tribal raiders of Kashmir have free transit through Pakistan. Food and other supplies are also secure from Pakistan. Indeed, we have reliable reports that the raiders get their rations from military messes in Pakistan. The Government of India demanded an end to all such aid, access, supplies and training. Liaquat promised to reply, and on December 31st, when Nehru had as yet received no official response from Pakistan, India submitted its formal complaint to the UN Security Council, an action urged by Mountbatten, but one which Nehru and his cabinet would long regret having initiated. India's complaint requested the Security Council to call upon Pakistan to put an end immediately to all assistance it was providing frontier tribal invaders of Kashmir, a state which has acceded to the dominion of India and is part of India, or the government of India may be compelled in self-defense to enter Pakistan territory in order to take military action against the invaders. Pakistan replied to India's complaint on January 15, 1948, and in a sound legal fashion, Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan cross-complained. Liaquat's first brief argued the Pakistan government emphatically denied that they are giving aid and assistance to the so-called invaders or have committed any act of aggression against India. and Pakistan's complaint against India, filed the same day in the Security Council, and an even longer document called Particulars of Pakistan's Case, served to place a number of broader issues and problems still festering between the newborn neighbors on the Council's agenda. An extensive campaign of genocide directed against the Muslim population of East Punjab, Delhi, Ajmer, etc., was taken by the non Muslim rulers, people, officials, police, and armed forces of the states concerned, and the Union of India, still in progress. Large number of Muslims, running into hundreds of thousands, have been ruthlessly massacred. Vastly larger numbers maimed, wounded, and injured, and over 5 million driven from their homes. Brutal and unmentionable crimes have been committed against women and children. Property worth thousands of millions of rupees has been destroyed. Concluding its cross complaint, Pakistan asked the Security Council to call upon India to desist from acts of aggression against Pakistan and to appoint a commission or commissions of the UN to investigate all of its charges and to arrange for cessation of fighting in the state of Jammu and Kashmir and elsewhere in the subcontinent. A bill of particulars added documentation to support these various charges. Jinnah had no strength to fly to New York for the UN debate on India and Pakistan, but Foreign Minister Sir Mohammad Zafarullah Khan performed brilliantly as Pakistan's advocate before the Security Council. He was judicious, articulate, and often eloquent in presenting his case while refuting India's charges. The Security Council appointed its commission, initially of 3 and later 5 members, who managed to effect a ceasefire by year's end. But it never won agreement to withdrawal of all the martial forces that kept pouring into that war-torn state, and it could never inaugurate a statewide plebiscite. The First World War of 1914 to 1918 was fought to end war, Jinnah recalled on January 23, 1948, launching the HMPS Dilawar Sword, Pakistan's first modern destroyer. This led to the birth of the League of Nations and the idea of collective security. But the League of Nations proved only a pious hope. The destruction caused by the First World War pales into insignificance as compared to the devastation and havoc resulting from the last World War, and now, with the discovery of the atom bomb, one shudders to think of the pattern of future wars. Pakistan must be prepared for all eventualities and dangers. The weak and the defenseless in this imperfect world invite aggression from others. Pakistan is still in its infancy, and so is its navy. But this infant means to grow up, and God willing, will grow up much sooner than many people think. You will have to make up for the smallness of your size by your courage and selfless devotion to duty, for it is not life that matters, but the courage, fortitude, and determination you bring to it. A few days earlier, Mahatma Gandhi won the last of his fasts unto death, persuading India's cabinet to pay its debt of 55 crores of rupees to Pakistan, helping to put an end to the slaughter and looting of Muslims in and around Delhi, which had become so tragic a scandal. Angry Sikhs and militant Hindus marched round Birla House with black flags shouting, "Let Gandhi die," calling him Muhammad Gandhi, since he so often advocated Pakistan's cause at prayer meetings and read from the Quran. And on January 20th, a bomb exploded in Birla House compound, but Gandhi had already finished his prayer meeting. 10 days later, his assassin did not miss. At his last prayer meeting on January 29th, Gandhi said, "If a man was in distress, the key to his happiness lay in labor. God did not create man to eat, drink, and make merry. Millionaires who ate without work were parasites. Even they should eat by the sweat of their brow, or should go without food. The only permissible exception was the disabled." Gandhiji then spoke about peasants. If he had his say, our Governor General and our Premier would be drawn from the Kisans, peasants. As real producers of wealth, they were verily the masters, while we have enslaved them. It was true, we were all laborers. In honest labor lay our salvation and the satisfaction of all vital needs. The next evening, before he could reach his prayer platform, Mahatma Gandhi was shot to death by a hate crazed Hindu Brahmin named Nathuram Godse. He was one of the greatest men produced by Hindu community, wrote Jinnah in his brief message of condolence. How ironic it must have seemed to him that an orthodox Hindu should have killed his most intransigent opponent, believing the Mahatma an agent of Pakistan and a Muslim lover. Norbert Bodkan, a vice president of Schroders banking group in New York, met with Jinnah in Karachi just a few days after Gandhi's assassination and reported that Jinnah spoke of Gandhi in much more generous terms than he saw fit to use in his message, acknowledging how great was the loss for the Muslims. Jinnah added that the real trouble was with the extremist groups, and he had been favorably impressed by the Indian government's firm handling of these following on Gandhi's assassination. New Delhi outlawed the Rashtriya Swayam Seva Singh and Hindu Mahasabha, putting many of their leaders under immediate preventative detention arrest. Mir Laik Ali now became Premier of Hyderabad, and India's government was most unsettled by the news of the Nizam's 20 crore loan to Pakistan. Because of that loan, of course, Pakistan remained solvent, and its first annual budget was presented to Karachi's assembly by Finance Minister Ghulam Muhammad on February 28th. Defense expenditure was projected to be no less than £27.8 million out of the total estimated expenditure of only £39.4 million. Revenues were so meager, moreover, that a deficit of £25.1 million was expected. Similarly, the Government of India allocated over 50% of its total budget to arms and projected a deficit of some £20 million. Pakistan did its best to encourage imports from the Sterling Bloc and the United States, but because of its minimal industrial development, the continuing influx of refugees, and poor agricultural output in 1948, revenues fell below anticipated totals, with its deficit soaring higher. Isfahani appealed urgently for US support, private as well as public. General Motors are interested in installing plants in Pakistan. Ambassador Isfahani reported to his great leader that March, but threatening war clouds over Kashmir kept holding them back. The World Bank and Export Bank were less worried about international instability, but required proper surveys and reports by first-class concerns of carefully worked-out schemes, regularly broken down to the minutest items of expenditure and income, before doling out any loans. Pakistan was as yet unprepared to present such detailed proposals. Jinnah himself had no energy left to work on such matters. He could not even answer Isfahani's letters anymore. An old Parsi friend from Bombay visited him in Karachi at this time and found him dozing in his garden at the government house. When Jinnah finally woke up, he whispered, "I am so tired, Jamshed, so tired." At 72, he had not only won his greatest suit but had outlived his foremost rival. It was high time for him to rest, was it not? Nonetheless, his government insisted that he fly to Dhaka that March to address the majority of Pakistan's population from their own group soil. He had not even gone to the east or set foot in Dhaka, the second capital of his nation. Great leader that he was, Jinnah answered the call of his cabinet and addressed a crowd estimated to be over 300,000 in Dhaka's Maidan on March 21st, 1948. That was his last major public address. Ironically, he delivered it in English, though he spoke to a Bengali language audience and informed them in the clearest language that the state language of Pakistan is going to be Urdu and no other language. This was, of course, the most volatile, divisive issue in Pakistani politics. Anyone who tries to mislead you is really the enemy of Pakistan. Without one state language, no nation can remain tied up solidly together and function. Look at the history of other countries. Therefore, so far as the state language is concerned, Pakistan's language shall be Urdu. I tell you once again, do not fall into the trap of those who are the enemies of Pakistan. Unfortunately, you have fifth columnists, and I am sorry to say they are Muslims who are financed by outsiders. You must have patience. With your help and with your support, we will make Pakistan a mighty state. No amount of trouble, no amount of hard work or sacrifice is too much or to be shirked. I wish you Godspeed. He did not live to return, however, or to see East Pakistan metamorphed through fire into the separate nation of Bangladesh, where Bengali would become and remain the sole official language. The frontier grew more restive as well. Pathans continued talking about a state of their own, Pashtunistan, and even the Balochis kept murmuring about a greater Balochistan. So in April, Jinnah was flown to Peshawar, where he had to speak at Islamia College and to Air Force cadets at Risalpur and to the civil officers at the government house, and then at an open air meeting in Peshawar where he was drenched to the bone. Fatma recalled. That night, it was obvious that he had caught a chill, but he refused to send for a doctor. It's nothing, he said to me, just a cold. This cold was beginning of the end. In Karachi, his cough continued, and only when I forced a doctor on him did we learn that he had bronchitis. Jinnah knew it was much worse than either a cold or bronchitis, but did not wish to alarm Fatima more than was absolutely necessary. He understood too well by then that there was no cure for his sickness, no simple patent medicine to take his pain away or make the coughing stop. Jinnah's relations with his closest colleagues deteriorated rapidly in the final months of his life as he grew weaker and daily more conscious of the imminence of death. He was less patient with the inefficiency and ineptitude, more easily angered by the usual excuses for not getting anything done. Before dying, he naturally wanted to see significant progress in his struggling infant land. In mid-April, at a private and exclusive lunch at the Nawab of Bahawalpur's house, Jinnah called Liaquat mediocre in luncheon conversation with M.A. Khoro, the then Chief Minister of Sindh. Relations with the Governor-General and his Prime Minister could hardly have been less than strained, perhaps in that era of unrelieved national calamity and stress, financial stringency and virtual war. Liaquat reportedly wrote Jinnah in January and offered to resign as Prime Minister after learning from his Begum of Jinnah's angrily and openly expressed dissatisfaction with his work. Jinnah expressed equal frustration and disgust at the way the Nawab of Mamdod, then Chief Minister of Punjab, was uninterested in the fate of refugees. He called Mamdod and Governor mildly to Karachi in May and told Mamdod, who had been his right arm in winning the Punjab for the League, that he was useless as a Prime Minister, which, Moody reported, was only too true. He, Jinnah, therefore nominated Mian Mumtaz Daultana to take control of the Punjab ministry, but Daultana refused, protesting that he had complete confidence in Mamdod. I, Moody, knew that he, Daultana, knew that if he did become Prime Minister, Mamdod would just about cut his throat. Jinnah was very angry and the meeting was adjourned. Jinnah rounded on me. Your policy is weak. You've lost your nerve. I asked what his orders for me were. He said, "None." I then asked what his advice to me would be as a friend. He replied, "Wash your hands of them, as I am going to do." It was clear that Jinnah was far from well. Indeed, he had to lie down immediately after our meeting. In June, Jinnah and Fatma flew to Quetta, where he could breathe the cool, bracing air of Balochistan mountain country. Within a few days of our arrival, he was able to sleep and eat well. The coughing subsided and his temperature came down to normal, Fatma recalled. For the first time in many years, he seemed relaxed. On June 14th, Jinnah addressed the officers of Quetta's Staff College, reflecting perhaps his deepest anxieties about the growing strain in his relations with the cabinet and other official colleagues. You, along with other forces in Pakistan, are the custodians of the life, property, and honor of the people of Pakistan. The defense forces are the most vital of all Pakistan's services, and correspondingly, a very heavy responsibility and burden lies on your shoulders. I want you to remember, and if you have time enough, you should study the Government of India Act as adapted for use in Pakistan, which is our present constitution, that the executive authority flows from the head of the government of Pakistan, who is the Governor General, and therefore any command or orders that may come to you cannot come without the sanction of the executive head. The next day, he told the Quetta municipality, which presented him with a handsome Belief Fund purse, that luckily Balochistan was spared the tragedy which the Punjab went through on the establishment of Pakistan. Quetta may be as great a civil station as a cantonment. For a large part of the western Pakistan, it will be the natural summer resort. It naturally pains me to find the curse of provincialism holding sway over any section of Pakistanis. Pakistan must be rid of this evil. It is a relic of the old administration, British control. We are now Pakistanis, not Balochis, Pathans, Sindhis, Bengalis, Punjabis, and so on. And we should be proud to be known as Pakistanis and nothing else. Fatma tried to talk him out of agreeing to fly back to Karachi to speak at the opening ceremony of the State Bank of Pakistan on 1st July 1948, but Jinnah insisted on going. The flight so exhausted him that he could hardly get out of bed to deliver that speech that was written for him. As Fatma noted, those who saw and heard him must have realized that he was not in good health. His voice was scarcely audible, and he paused and coughed his way through his speech. When we returned home, he collapsed into bed with his shoes on. He had earlier accepted an invitation from the Canadian Commissioner of Trade to attend a reception that evening to celebrate the 81st anniversary of the Dominion. That was to be the last social function Jinnah would ever attend. On July 6th, Jinnah and his sister flew back to Quetta, and he continued to run a slight fever, so the doctors advised moving him to even more rarefied an atmosphere, Ziyarat, a lonely Balochi hill station 40 miles and several thousand feet above Quetta, boasted a residency bungalow built by the British. That hill station was perched like an eagle at the top of the timber line. It was Jinnah's last retreat in the search of air pure enough to save his dying lungs. A cluster of fruit trees and bed of flowers add to the beauty of the place, Fatma recalled, noting how her brother, whose condition was deteriorating, liked its quiet charm. Lieutenant Colonel Ilahi Bakhsh of the Indian Medical Service was sitting on his lawn in Lahore after dinner on July 21st when Muhammad Ali, the Secretary General to the government of Pakistan, phoned from Karachi ordering him to fly immediately to Quetta. Dr. Bakhsh was met at the airport there on Friday afternoon by Major General M.A. Khan and Colonel K. Jilani, who drove with him in the Governor General's car to Ziyarat. Nobody knew what he was suffering from. recalled Baksh. All I could gather was that he abhorred injections and patent medicines and preferred to be addressed as Sir and not as Your Excellency. Fatma brought him to his great leader's bedroom the next morning. I found the Qaid-e-Azam lying in bed facing the door. He looked shockingly thin and weak and had an ashen grey complexion. His appearance that morning frightened me. He must have guessed what was in my mind. He diverted my attention by motioning me to a chair and inquiring if I had a pleasant journey. I sat down and asked for a detailed account of his present and previous illnesses. There is nothing much wrong with me, he told me, except that I have got stomach trouble and exhaustion due to overwork and worry. For 40 years, I have worked for 14 hours a day, never knowing what disease was. However, for the last few years, I have been having annual attacks of fever and cough. My doctors in Bombay regarded these as attacks of bronchitis, and with the usual treatment and rest in bed, I generally recovered within a week or so. For the last year or two, however, they have increased both in frequency and severity and are much more exhausting. While I was listening to him, I found him losing breath after every sentence and sometimes pausing in the middle. His mouth was dry and he moistened his lips many times while talking. The voice lacked tone and was almost inaudible. He had a couple of fits of coughing which left him exhausted. After a short pause, during which he dosed his eyes and looked more dead than alive, he continued. About 3 weeks ago, I caught a chill and developed fever and a cough for which the civil surgeon of Quetta prescribed penicillin lozenges. I have been taking these since. My cold is better, the fever is less, but I feel very weak. I don't think there is anything organically wrong with me. If my stomach can be put right, I will recover soon. Many years ago, I had a rather bad stomach trouble for which I consulted 2 or 3 London specialists, but they failed to diagnose my illness and one of them even advised operation. I didn't submit to the operations and on the advice of another London doctor went to Germany and consulted a famous doctor. He told me that I had no organic trouble and only needed rest and regulation of diet. I stayed in his clinic for a few weeks and recovered completely. In 1934, I was diagnosed by a Bombay doctor to be suffering from heart disease, but a heart specialist in Germany assured me that my heart was perfectly normal. Doctor asked the Governor General to remove his silk pajama top so that he could listen to his heart. I observed with distress that he was much thinner than he appeared with clothes on and could not make out how he had managed to survive and work in such an advanced stage of emaciation. I had seen equally severe cases among the prisoners of war at Singapore. The physical examination dimmed my hopes. Although I did not reveal my fears to the patient, I expressed a desire to have him investigated further before I could give my final diagnosis, but hinted that the root cause of his trouble appeared to me to be lung disease and not his stomach. The Qaid-e-Azam still believed, however, that his primary trouble was his stomach and urged me to pay more attention to it. Baksh did not ignore his patient's concern and prescribed a high-caloric, low-residue diet. Fatima appeared to doubt the advantage of inflicting such a diet on her brother, but said nothing, and for a day or two, Jinnah seemed to eat better, for the wise doctor also prescribed a digestive mixture. Baksh did his best, in fact, that any medical practitioner could have done. He rang up the civil surgeon from Quetta, who drove up to Ziyarat the next morning with his clinical pathologist and brought along his microscope and reagents to test Jinnah's blood, sputum, and do the usual laboratory work. Their lab findings confirmed the colonel's suspicions. With so important a patient, however, further corroboration was considered essential before surrendering hope to the fatal disease that was consuming his lungs. So Baksh wired his own hospital in Lahore and ordered 3 of its best specialists to fly to Ziyarat, telling one of them to bring his portable X-ray along. Then he wired Karachi for special medicines. Within the week, most of Pakistan's advanced medical people were flown or driven 8,500 feet above sea level to Ziyarat. They concentrated on the dying old man who coughed without respite in that remote spot, whose strange name means burial tomb, like the ancient ziggurat mound of Mesopotamia erected at the dawn of civilization to house the remains of a god king.